everybody, it's Ms. Luther, and I'm going to be talking to you about the fall of the Ottoman Empire today and why that matters. Okay, key terms for today: nationalism and partitioning. Nationalism is a love for your country and just having pride for your country, and partitioning is the breaking up of land. This is a huge thing for what we're going to talk about with the Ottoman Empire, and we're going to come back to in Africa, so please don't forget, partitioning is the breaking up of land. Also, if you're on Twitter, go ahead and put a hashtag in so we can see what you are getting from this lesson. Alright, the essential question for today: what effect did European partitioning have on the Middle East? Also, we want to know why that still matters. When we get to the end of the lesson, you're clearly going to see how the Ottoman Empire has a huge effect on why we're still having quarrels or fights in the Middle East. Alright, the beginning. The Prophet Muhammad, founder of Islam, died in 632 AD, and after that, Islam began spreading like crazy throughout the Middle East. I'm going to spare you a map because I know I've already asked you to look at it several today already. And then Mongols invaded in 1215, and they slowed down the growth. They did not share the same religion, so they kind of put a halt to that. However, in 1299 AD, the Sultan Osman began expanding his kingdom, and he named the Ottoman Empire after himself. He was the creator of the Ottoman Empire. You can see that from the interactive map, which was step 1 of your web quest. Alright, the Ottoman Empire was an Islamic empire. There are several Islamic empires, as you can see on the maps of war link. They tolerated other religions, especially Christians and Jews. This was rare for other empires. The empires have a supreme ruler, and usually that supreme ruler requires you all to share common faith, common practices, and policies. So the fact that the Ottoman Empire embraced people that were different, and they tolerated and even encouraged loyalty to their faiths, was a very rare thing during that time. It was definitely one of the longest lasting and largest empires in history, perhaps because it was so tolerant of other people. Okay, comprehension check. Get out your listening sheet and write down a short answer to this question. What was the religion of the Ottoman Empire? Pause the video and write down your answer. Okay, if you said the Ottoman Empire was an Islamic or a Muslim empire, you are correct. Okay, the rise of the Ottoman Empire. Here's a little map I found online. All the green territory was part of the Ottoman Empire, so you can see the Balkan Peninsula that you learned about last year in 6th grade social studies. Modern day Turkey, that was the real central place for it. Northern Africa and the Arabian Peninsula were all part of the Ottoman territory. It got this big under the leadership of Suleiman I, and it had Europe, Asia, and Africa. Because empires only have a supreme ruler, it was hard to govern the vast amount of land they had conquered. How could you imagine one person being in charge of all that area and all the different people living in that area having the same rules? Well, it's kind of hard to. And because of that, the Ottoman Empire began to have some trouble when it got bigger. The craftsman ways of the Ottoman Empire could not keep up with the new industrialism, such as factories and all that kind of stuff that was happening in Europe. And so they began to have to acquire debt to keep up, to make sure that their economy was staying competitive with the rest of the world. Okay, comprehension check. This is kind of a higher order thinking. Why was industrialization more profitable than the craftsman style work? What would make industrialization more profitable? Alright, the fall of the Ottoman Empire. At the beginning of World War I, the Ottomans' land had shriveled up and they were in vast amounts of debt. When World War I began, the Ottomans sided with the Central Powers, Germany and Italy, because they hated Russia. They explored the idea of siding with Great Britain, but ultimately when they latched on and made an alliance with Russia, they said no, we're not siding with Russia, so therefore they ended up with the Central Powers, Germany and Italy. Of course, they lost the war, and as it normally goes, war territory is carved up into many smaller countries, and they were divided. Now, the Ottomans were the main authority in Northern Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and southeastern Europe. So this led to a lack of central authority in the region, which was obviously not a positive thing. The European politicians came in and decided to draw up new territories at the end of the war. And the politicians who did that, they did not care, and they paid little attention to the ethnic and religious groups who were living in these areas. So they mixed Kurds and Arabs and blah blah blah, all these different cultures, and they wanted them to reside in peace. And that just can't happen when you have so many differences. The new boundaries didn't take into consideration the concept of nationalism. The idea is that countries are most successful if the people who live there share the same common culture, historic, and religious beliefs. And as a result, there's been a lot of conflict. Many different groups tried to live together in countries that were created by those who did not realize that those new boundaries would cause. Quite frankly, they probably just did not care. They were just trying to split it up and expand their kingdom, something that you talked about last year in 6th grade called imperialism. Alright, another comprehension check. What concept did European politicians fail to consider when drawing new borders in the Middle East? I just told you, pause your video or go back and write your answer. Alright, the dissolution. The partitioning of the Ottoman Empire led to the rise of Western powers in the Middle East. The earliest resistance to that influence was from the Turkish national movement and became more widespread after World War II. Then entered the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration really affected the northern part of the former Ottoman Empire, and it encouraged a Zionist movement to make a Jewish homeland in the Palestine region, which was the site of the ancient Kingdom of Israel. But at the time, it had a lot of Arabs and Muslims in it. Many of the smaller countries that were occupied during that time by European forces were too small to rid themselves of European occupation, except for Palestine. Of course, there was the conflict of Zionism as a result of the Balfour Declaration, and the Arab nationalism and the Zionists created a situation which the British could not resolve. They kept going back and forth, and they did have the military and economic strength to sustain themselves against the European forces. The rise of Adolf Hitler in Germany created a new urgency in the Zionist movement to create a new Jewish state in Palestine, which really is something that they're still feuding over today. And it brings us to what we're going to be doing our DBQ on in the coming weeks. So, I'm going to close out with you right now. And here's the last thing I want to reflect on. What was going on during World War II with Adolf Hitler specifically that would make Zionism such an important issue and such a pressing issue? Okay, once you answer that, you are free to move on. The next step is step 4, 3 YouTube videos. They have questions where you will answer have short answers, and you're good to go. Thank you for listening.